Kia whakapapa ponamu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, huie taikie. Great. So we're going to share the screen, and I think Megan is speaking first. So welcome, Megan.
Kia ora tātou, everyone. I'm so thrilled that you're all able to join us here today in terms of getting some background information about our tertiary grants program. So I'm going to start us off today. So to let you know, my name's Megan Ingle, and I am the current chair for the project advisory group for this particular project. My background in libraries is that I've worked in libraries for a number of years, since about 2006, both here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but also across in Melbourne, Australia as well. So I'm currently based in Wellington, and the background behind me is a scene from Wellington. And I work at the National Library of New Zealand and the Services to Schools team. So I'm in part of the advisory group representatives from LIANZA. So there are 3 from LIANZA and also 3 representatives from SLANZA as well. So my role in this project advisory is as a personal member of LIANZA. So as Anna has mentioned, there are a number of us here today in terms of the panel for this webinar. So Julia will be here as a representative of SLANZA. You've heard from Anna, and we also have the team from Perpetual Guardian as well. So across all of the panel, we'll be giving you some background about the project, its aims, the funding that's available, the tertiary providers, and go through a little bit more background about the application process. So there will, as Anna has alluded to, there will be an opportunity for some questions at the end. But just to make sure that for those of you, you know that if there's any questions that we can't address immediately, or we need to get a bit more of a detailed response to, we will endeavour to follow those up with you as well. So hopefully some of you have already had a chance to look at our FAQs and also our funding guidelines, and those have been posted online. But if there's any questions that may not have been answered there, it is really helpful for us to know about those particular questions, so that we might be able to update our FAQs or our funding guidelines as well. So a bit of background about this project. Back in 2021, so last year, the Library Information Association of New Zealand, LIANZA, and the School Library Association of New Zealand, which is SLANZA, formed a strategic partnership, and it's about working together, the 2 organisations working together to enable what we call a qualifications uplift across the entire library and information sector. Now, some of you may already be aware of a much bigger program of work, which is the New Zealand Libraries Partnership Program, or we often refer to it as NZLPP. And this particular project around tertiary grants has actually come out of the work from NZLPP. So in terms of our strategic partnership and this particular project, there are some real specific aims to this particular project, and the funding really is intended to enable greater access to uplift qualifications across all of the library and information sector. So that's kind of where this particular project came about from NZLPP. And so the purpose for the tertiary grants is to upskill the current workforce. And I suspect that many of you here today may already be working in libraries. It's also about attracting new people to our sector, to allow them to gain qualifications, with the hope that we're, encouraging them to come and work within our library and information sector. And more broadly, it's about ensuring that our workforce is qualified and future ready, so that we can really demonstrate the value and impact of library and information services. So the project advisory group, like I've said, there are representatives from LIANZA and there are representatives of SLANZA. We've been working through the process of managing and administering what is quite a sizable NZLPP grant. And so I really also want to acknowledge another critical partner in this partnership with us, and that's Perpetual Guardian. And they will play a significant part alongside us in the administration of this particular project. So as I've said, the Perpetual Guardian team is here today, and they have a real depth of experience within the grants field, as well as the support for you as potential applicants, whether that is via email or 0800. So, you know, the support is there as well through that application process. And we'll come back to that a little bit more shortly. But for now, that kind of gives you a bit of background about where this project has come from and what those big kind of lofty goals and aims for the project are. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pass over to Julia, and she's going to outline some of the reasons that, you know, either yourselves or other people that we want you to encourage to apply. Over to you, Julia.
Ngā mihi, Megan. Kia ora koutou, ko Julia Smith aho, no keri aho. I've been a SLANZA member for 18 years, and I've been part of the National Executive for 8 years. But my paid job is I work at Kirikiri High School as the librarian. We have 1,600 students from year 7 to 13. Okay, as Te Pohuaki National Librarian Rachel Easton states on this, in this quote, these grants will have a huge positive impact across library sectors. Tuition-free tertiary courses will strengthen our sectors by upskilling the workforce, attracting new members and aiding career pathways. Strengthened sector workforces will raise the profile and critical role of librarians in Aotearoa. Why should you apply? Tuition costs are an obvious and real barrier to tertiary study. By eliminating the opportunity divide of further education, tuition-free tertiary courses in library and information studies will facilitate equitable access across our sectors, supporting a diverse and inclusive membership to the benefit of the sectors and the communities they serve. Why should you apply? Capability training will enhance and fulfill our role as literacy and information literacy specialists, gaining practices, cultural competencies, and knowledge of library management. This will benefit your workplace, your colleagues, and the communities you serve. Why should you apply? Enhanced capabilities and the confidence gained from graduating with library and information qualifications is empowering for you personally. Why should you apply? This is an amazing opportunity for people wanting to gain a new qualification in the library and information sector. Thank you, Angie.
So which qualifications? If you've gone in and had a bit of a read around, you will know a little bit about this, but the library and information qualifications that will be funded will support careers in a range of different libraries. So we've school, public, tertiary, etc. But also in government departments, private companies, district health boards, research institutions, law firms, local government, art galleries, museums, prisons, whānau iwi and marae collections, Aftanga, Tuku Iho, and many other places where people in communities need to access information relevant to their work and life. And I know many of you who are already in libraries are really familiar with all the different places that library and information professionals work. But when I first started getting involved in libraries, I was really surprised to learn that there were people that worked in libraries in Lion Breweries and Motat and Auckland Art Gallery, and all sorts of places that I had never really thought of. But it sort of showed to me what a really interesting profession you can have when you work in library and information, in the library and information sector. So in 2022, these grants will be given only for certificates, diplomas, bachelor degrees, graduate certificates, postgraduate diplomas, and master's degrees at 3 institutions that offer these library and information qualifications. So that's Victoria University of Wellington, Open Polytechnic, or Te Wananga o Raukawa. And we've had a few questions about funding for PhDs and masters by thesis. And so just to note that we won't be providing funding for that in the March 22 round, but this may be under consideration for future funding rounds. So if you're really interested in the postgraduate area, that might be important for you to know that.
Kia ora, thanks, Anna. So this is back to me. So as we heard, libraries are an incredibly diverse place to work, and it's looking at who we want to encourage from people that are currently working in the sector, but also thinking really broadly, in workplaces and your communities. Are there people out there that you think, actually, I think they'd be really great to come and join our profession? So it's also about putting your thinking hat on about who you might be encouraging to come and join our profession. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 really big aims for this project in terms of upskilling the current workforce, attracting new people, and making sure that our workforce is qualified and future ready. So I'll speak quite broadly to the big project, and then I'm also going to talk about a couple of specific priority areas that we're looking at for the grant rounds in 2022. So I also want to make it really clear that obviously we're in the first grant round, and this is what we refer to as the March 2022 grant round. This is a bit of a one-off in March. Our next grant round will be in October 2022, and then subsequent years there will be a grant round in October. So there'll only be 1 grant round going forward per year. So who are we looking at in terms of applying? It's a broad pool. So we're looking for people who are brand new to the sector, either just coming in or just thinking about coming into the sector. There's also people that are currently working in the sector as well. We're looking for people who are starting their first library and information qualification. So what this means is they might have quals in another subject area, but they don't have a qualification, that covers that library information knowledge management qualification. We're looking for people who might have already completed a qualification and are actually looking to start a new qualification at a higher level. There's also people who may currently be enrolled, and once they've completed their current qualification, the next step when they're stepping up to their next qualification at a higher level, that's also another group of people to apply. We're really looking for individuals who can demonstrate motivation and determination to help the library, knowledge management and information sector really grow and flourish in the future. So to be an engaged member of our profession. So it's a pretty broad group. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now about some of the priority groups that we've identified for the grant rounds in March 2022 and October 2022. So all applications will be considered, but we don't yet know how big that pool is going to be. We've identified these priority groups for this year's 2022 grant rounds as people who are under 35, people who are Māori, people who are Pacifica, and people for whom this is their very first library and information qualification. So what that means is in the big pool of applicants, people that may fit into these priority groups, there will be a priority weighting given to those applications just to identify that those are some priority groups that we're looking to work with. That said, we don't know how many people will apply from those priority groups. So in the broad scheme of things, we are strongly encouraging people to apply from that wide suite of potential applicants. So, if you already hold a qualification and are looking to move up to that next level, all applicants will be considered in this grant round, but we just wanted to be really clear that we have identified some of those priority groups, about encouraging them to come into the sector, or to get, if they're in the sector, to get qualified and remain in the sector as well. So I'm going to pass over to Anna, but I just wanted to reiterate in terms of those who can apply, there's some quite detailed information in our FAQs and in the funding guidelines, which gives some different scenarios of what this might look like. So if you haven't already had a chance to look at the FAQs and the funding guidelines, then I would strongly recommend bookmarking that to also have a look through. So like I say, I'm going to pass over to Anna now, and Anna's going to talk a little bit more about the amounts of the grants and what that potentially looks like.
Thanks, Megan. So how much might the grant be for? So we really wanted to stress that the grants will provide funding first and foremost for tertiary fees. However, consideration may be given to funding other costs which might be critical for you to carry out your studies, such as childcare, accommodation, travel, technology, research-related costs, etc. So we will consider everything, but we really wanted to make the point that it's the tertiary fees that are our priority for funding. And as Megan said, we have no idea yet how many applications we might get in this first round, so we're sort of learning as we go along. And we will be assessing grant values according to the range of applications that are received in this grant round, as well as the needs put forward by students. But in 2022, it's expected that grants will be up to $10,000 per annum, because we prefer to make grants to be sufficiently substantial to enable you to actually complete your study in its entirety. And multi-level funding may be approved when you first apply. However, we just also want to make the point that continuation of your tertiary grant funding will need to be formally approved each subsequent year, dependent on successful course completion. So I think as we've gone through this work together, LIANZA and SLANZA and our advisory group, we've often said we really want to encourage people to put their best foot forward. So really think long and hard about what it is that you want to do, because this opportunity is so unusual that I really encourage you to put your best foot forward and reach for the stars and see what you might be able to achieve.
Now, just double checking, it looks like we've lost the presentation on screen, but I might just do a quick transition to what we're looking at next, where I'm just going to pass through to Julia, because we're going to be looking at the particular application dates. So that's what we'll have a quick yarn about next.
Oops. Thank you. So as Megan touched on, there are two funding rounds this year. The first is open now, obviously, from the 1st of March to the 31st of March. That's a one-off, this grant. The second round is in October, from the 4th to the 22nd of October. After this March round, it'll be every October until the funding runs out. So this one-off round, grant round in March, is intended for students commencing study in trimester 2 of 2022.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Kirsten, called Kirsten Takunua. I represent Perpetual Guardian, and we're really proud to be supporting the Library and School Library Associations with this really incredible grant round. You'll see also my colleagues Jessie and Amy on the lines, if ladies could put out a wave. If you have any questions in regards to the application process or when you're registering, it is very likely that it will be Jessie, myself, Amy, or our colleague Lynette, who you will be corresponding with on any questions that you have. So on the where and how to apply side of things, the way that our online system works is that you need to pop onto the Perpetual Guardian website or the LIANZA website, follow links through and register in order to be able to submit a grant. So once you've registered with the Perpetual Guardian Funding Hub, you will come through to a section that details what's open right now for grants. We have a few odds and ends out there at the moment, and you'll see in nice big bold lettering the LIANZA and SLANZA application process. When you click into that, at the beginning of the electronic form, you'll see all the criteria that Megan, Anna and Julia have been taking you through, and just so that it's there for you to keep referring to as you work your way through the questions in the form. At the base of the form, you'll be asked to attach documents, and that's just your usual browse function to bring in any documents that you help. We illustrate what documents we'd like to see, but there are also some optional documents so that you can illustrate your hardworking background, what you bring to the role, previous qualifications and things like that. A little declaration, you click submit and the applications come back through to us, ready to pass on to the LIANZA and SLANZA teams for an evaluation of the application suite. So that's the part that we play in the process, and please feel free to email us at any time at philanthropy@pgtrust.co.nz, and we're happy to help you at any time. Please don't feel overwhelmed by the digital process. We are happy to hold your hand throughout, so reach out anytime.
Kia ora, thank you, Kirsten. I've just popped some information in the chat in terms of some of the information that was on the slide, which we've just lost temporarily here, and that includes the email address as well as the Perpetual Guardian site in terms of the application process. So as we said, there is this application process, and one of the things about working through with PG is you register with the site first before you submit your application. So one of the things that we strongly encourage, if you're considering for this March grant round, or you're considering even for the October grant round, is to go ahead and get yourself registered on the Perpetual Guardian website. Work through that process to give you a better sense of what might be expected once you're submitting your application. So that's quite a bit of background from us about the project, who's kind of been involved in the project, and some of the things that we're hoping to achieve through this project. We've kind of come to the more formal end of the presentation. I'm just going to check in and see if there are any particular questions in the chat. So just bear with me as I just do a quick scan back up through there, just to double check if I have missed anything. Right, so there is a question that's come through. I'm just going to read it aloud for the benefit of the recording. So please discuss further the multi-level funding, i.e. planning a part-time approach to study, planning one paper per trimester over 18 months. So I'm just going to double check what I understand this question to be referring to, maybe something that Anna has alluded to, in that, we're looking at for every year, sorry, let me start that again. You would apply for the qualification that you're looking to study for, and whether that's full-time or part-time. And if that is a successful application, every year you just need to be able to report back that you're successfully progressing through that part-time study, so that that money can be allocated for the next period of study. I'm just going to check if that didn't answer the specifics of the question. Can you just do a follow-up in the Q&A in the chat? Because we're very aware that for a lot of us, part-time study is our reality. Many of us have already got qualifications that we did through part-time study, and we know that that's likely to be quite common for a lot of people who are applying, that they will be looking to complete their studies over a part-time basis over a number of semesters, years, depending on what you're studying. So I'm just going to invite if there are any other questions in the chat. And I see Kirsten just popping in there as well. Yeah.
Something we often get called about is retrospective funding. Funding while you're in the middle of studying, or you're coming to the end of studying. So I thought it might be quite nice to let the group know about the March round compared to the ongoing October rounds in that regard.
Thank you, Kirsten. If we haven't touched on that, I apologise for that, folks.
I might have missed it.
What Kirsten is referring to here, so as we've alluded to, in 2022, so this year, we have 2 grant rounds. We have the March grant round, which we're currently in, and we have the October grant round that we're currently in. So for the March round, it's a one-off grant round this particular year. So the majority of it that we are intending is for people who are studying from semester 2 this year. So that might be semester 2 and semester 3 coming up. So that's where we imagine a lot of people are thinking about studying, and that's why they've come along for the information session. But as a one-off for the March grant round, we will also consider applications from anyone who began studying in semester 1 of 2022. Normally, we're looking to fund people who are starting and heading off on a qualifications journey. You apply for the funding and then you start your study after that funding has been approved. But for the March round this year, it is a one-off. And the reason for that is we wanted to acknowledge that we know this funding was announced possibly 12 months ago or 12 or more months ago as part of NZLPP. And we know that some people have started studying this year in 2022. So we've made a decision that there will be an opportunity for those who started studying in 2022 to put in an application in March to be considered within that pool of applicants. The process for grant funding for tertiary environment is often that there's quite a long lead-in time, and for us to be working in with the organisations and institutions, so Open Polytech, Te Anau Ōrāokawa and Victoria University, there is a bit of a lead-in time, and we weren't able to get this lead-in time ready way back last year in time for those that are starting in semester 1 of 2022. So my apologies. Thank you, Kirsten, if that hadn't been vocalised in this session. We do have some information, more in-depth information on the FAQs and also on the funding guidelines that are really clear about what's being considered within this March grant round as well. Now I've seen a flurry of things come through in the chat, so just bear with me as we get through. So there is a question in terms of, is the funding paid upfront or post completion of papers? So the funding is paid upfront. So it's paid to the institution. It's not paid to the individual. It's paid to the institution that you are studying through. Can you apply for student allowance if you study full time? I might have to hold that question. I don't have an answer to that question, and I'm just going to check. I don't think anyone here on the panel would have a specific for that. Kirsten?
We get asked that sometimes in regards to grants, and it really depends on a case-by-case situation, and you'd have to take that up with the benefit provider. Sometimes a grant can tip the qualification for a student allowance, but yeah, there's not a blanket rule in regards to this grant specifically.
Okay, thank you, Kirsten. So that does clear that up. It will depend on your particular situation and going back to whoever the provider is for student allowance. So I'm just checking. The next question is, I'm currently enrolled in an MIS and I'm partway through. So in order to qualify for a grant, would I need to change my enrolment to a grad dip, finish that, and then re-enroll for the master's bit? It's a really good question. I am going to have to refer you back to the institution because I don't know the specifics of what would happen about you changing enrolment partway through in terms of a program that you're already enrolled in. But it is, we are looking for people who are currently studying partway through a qualification that may have started prior to 2022. The goal is that you complete that qualification before you apply potentially for a grant. But just being aware that whichever qualification you're looking at, you do need to have a chat with the educational institution that you're working with in terms of the regulations about changing programs or what that means. So I would suggest having a chat with who you're enrolled with and working out what the logistics are for that, and also being aware that this is an open process in terms of, we don't know what the pool of applicants will look like as well. So factoring that into the choices that you make, and the work involved in changing, applying and so forth. So sorry, that doesn't give a hard and fast answer, but I would strongly recommend that you go back to your educational institution and have a conversation with them first. So the next question we've got coming through: can we apply for a grant this year and start in February 2023, knowing that we will have the financial backing to complete the qualification? So in order to answer this, the October grant round for 2022, it's that particular grant round that is intended for those that will be starting in 2023. So the October grant round is where you would put in your application for consideration about studying next year. So again, I would really strongly encourage you to still go on to the Perpetual Guardian website and to look at the registration process, get set up and have a look around to work out what it is that you need to start preparing for that October grant round. The next question that's come through is, do you help pay any cost to a primary school child while I'm studying full-time? The interpretation I've got of this is about whether childcare costs may be covered if people are studying full-time. As we've spoken to, earlier, and I think it was Anna, the primary goal for these funds is about tertiary fees. However, and we've stated this on our FAQs and the funding guidelines, if there are other factors and other costs that you may wish for us to consider as part of the application process, you can put that into your application and it may be considered, but it's not a hard and fast yes or no. The primary goal is around tertiary costs and those tertiary fees, but we are aware that there are other things that may impact and influence people's choices to study. So we strongly recommend you have a look at the application process and work around putting that sort of information into your application for consideration. So I'm going to read aloud the next question. How many years do you foresee the grant being offered for? For if I'm doing a part-time diploma over 3 years and want to do a certificate after that, would I need to reapply, or would the grant even be available in 3 years? It's a really good question. So just to get back to some of the things that we talked about earlier on in the session, if you're currently studying at a diploma level, and I am aware that diplomas, I think, can be level 5 or level 6, depending on what it is in the NZQA framework. So it will firstly depend on what level your diploma is at. And secondly, what level the certificate is at. Because what we're looking for is moving up to the next level of a qualification. So it's not as simple as, can I gain another qualification within library and information studies? It's about, am I moving up to the next level? So the first thing that I would do is to recommend you go back and chat with your educational institution. Have a check, make sure that you're aware of which levels your diplomas are at and your certificates are at, and then look at where that sort of fits in to a potential application process. In terms of reapplying, the way I've interpreted the question is whether you would reapply for each qualification. And yes, those qualifications would be treated differently. So there would be an application, it wouldn't be you are funded for X number of qualifications, it's for a qualification. So you would need to reconsider applying after that point in time. In terms of the availability of the grants, again, this is a substantial amount of money, but we don't know what's going to happen at each of those particular grant rounds. And this is the first time that we've opened the grant rounds in March. We're anticipating a grant round March, October of this year, October of next year. And by that stage, we'll have a better sense of what that looks like for subsequent years. So I apologise, we can't give a hard and fast answer for how long the bigger pool of money will be available for. The next question that's come through on the chat: what is the time frame to hear back from the panel about whether being successful or unsuccessful? I may just grab Perpetual Guardian to come in here, but at this stage, my understanding is that we're working to a 4 to 6 week turnaround. Is that correct, Kirsten?
Yes, so if we're looking at the March grant round, it's likely that decisions will be made in later April. So you'll know, if not in later April, early May at the absolute latest. In regards to the October grant round, and this will be cyclical from here on out, so every October we'll probably have made decisions at some point in November, so you'll know well before Christmas whether or not you've been successful in your application.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Sorry, just to add to that, so sorry, Megan. If for any reason there are delays, say for example, the entire evaluation board is wiped out by the spicy flu, we keep in touch with you to let you know about any delays, because we want to enable you to make all the plans you need to make on your side personally. But yeah, that would be highly, highly unlikely.
Thank you. I'm just going to have a quick look in terms of any other questions. If there is a question that's in there that I haven't answered, could someone from the panel maybe just give me a shout if there's anything in particular?
I think you're getting them all there, Megan. So
okay.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate those that have been, felt in a position to ask the questions in the chat. Like I said earlier, it's really helpful for us to hear back from the community and the audience. If there's things that we haven't made clear enough in our FAQs or our funding guidelines that we need to add to, then, those are things for us to take into consideration. So thank you for asking the questions that you have. Right, sounds like I may have missed. Sorry, there's just one new question that's just popped in. Sorry, I hadn't quite picked that up. So the question that's come through is, do you then apply to study after you have heard back from the grant? Again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but I would recommend talking to your education institution about what their application dates are. They will give you a better steer for when those application dates open. And this is a decision, and I suspect, Kirsten, that this may be a question that does come through to Perpetual Guardian from time to time as well.
Yeah. So you don't have to have applied prior to school before applying for the grant. The bottom line is that we will not pay the grant until your enrolment is confirmed and accepted. However, you can apply before you've even decided to enroll, in which case you can confirm whether you've been successful or not prior to making that enrolment. So the timing is kind of up to you and your process a little bit. The only thing that's the hard and fast rule is that if you are successful, we will need to ultimately see proof of enrolment prior to paying the grant out.
Thanks, Kirsten. And I think, this kind of gets back to, why. So it's March now, the grant rounds are opening, but it's for study that may not be studying for June and July. And it's to allow people to kind of have that decision-making agency about, if I'm going to apply for a grant or if I'm not, if I'm going to apply to start studying or not. So it gives you a longer time frame rather than being, really squashed up. And that's why that October grant round, and this is quite common in the grants, space. If you're looking, at other potential funds and grants that are available through different educational organisations, you'll find that October is quite a common time for grants to open. It's not always the case, but it is quite common that it will open a period of time before the actual start date for your qualifications. So it doesn't look like there are any more questions that have come through the chat at this stage. I do want to encourage you obviously to look at the frequently asked questions, the funding guidelines, have a look at the PG or Perpetual Guardian registration process to kind of get yourself familiar. Strongly encourage you, if there are questions that have come up afterwards, and I think earlier in the chat we've put through the particular email address, which is comms@lianza.org.nz, if there are things that we haven't addressed today. Oh, sorry, there is another question. I will come back to that in just a moment. But it's also about encouraging you to think about who else is out there that might be worth kind of giving them a little nudge and saying, hey, I think you should come and join our profession, or you've got a job, it's great, but I really think, you know, let's think about some qualifications as well. So I appreciate everybody that's been able to make the time to come along today, and for those that will be subsequently watching the recording at a later date. We know that it's a great opportunity, and we really do want to see an incredible suite of applicants coming through, both in March, but also thinking about October as well.
I can probably help out a little bit with those questions if you like, Megan.
Oh, the two more that have come through, that'd be great. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kirsten. Yeah.
Pleasure. So Natasha, thank you. If you were successful in gaining a grant in March, do you still reapply in October? So the grants from this round here in March are for the 2022 year. So yes, you would still apply or reapply in October if you were looking for further support and additional support in regards to the following year, 2023. Kataraina, with the 1 year fees-free scheme, could we still access that scheme after we decide to complete library study with the grants? So fees-free is an interesting proposition. A lot of people for whom this is their very first piece of study will qualify for the fees-free scheme. As Megan mentioned earlier, this is primarily for your tertiary fees. So it would be a matter of coming back your second year, because you're still a new starter, having been funded in the first year fees-free, and applying for your following years as you work your way through that, that qualification. I hope that answers that question.
I just want to jump in and just, I might get the person who's asked the question about if you're successful in gaining a grant for March 2022, do you still need to apply in October? Just wanting to make sure that we've successfully answered that question. What it means is if you apply for a grant in October and it's a multi-year for that qualification is funded. So you wouldn't need to reapply for the same qualification in October. It's more that if you apply in March, you complete that qualification, and you're then looking to go on to get a subsequently higher level qualification in October, then you would be looking at heading off into the October grant round for a different qualification. So that's that clarity. It's, you know, it's per qualification. So I'm hoping that that's clarified that for the person who asked that question. There's another one that's come through. I'm currently studying a diploma in library and information studies. Last paper to be completed in semester 2. Would I be considered for the grant, or does it need to be from the beginning? So these grants are not intended to help you complete an existing qualification that you're enrolled in. But in the October grant round, so semester 2 grant round, which is October, if you are choosing to go on to do another qualification at a higher level from 2023, then you could apply in October for that next qualification about stepping up. So it's not about supporting you to finish a qualification that you're already enrolled in, unless you started it in semester 1 of 2022. And that's the one-off in March. But if you've been studying for a number of years in a qualification and it will finish next semester, that the grants aren't intended to help you complete that qualification. So I'm hoping that's clarified that. Okay, one more question that's come through. Does it matter how many other qualifications you have prior to applying for this grant if the course you'll be doing is your first information studies or library qualification. So just to reiterate, one of our priority groups is for people who are starting their very first library and information studies qualification. So that's the key thing, irrespective of what you may have studied in different areas beforehand. So it's not necessarily about how many or how few prior qualifications you've got. The factor is that this is your first information library knowledge management studies qualification. So as part of your application, you're also demonstrating your motivation to be part of the sector. And one of that is saying, this is my first qualification in this particular field about joining our profession. So I'm hoping that has answered that one as well. Right, I've got a specific question, but I may need to seek some clarification on this one. So, and I don't think this has come through on the general chat. So if a student is applying now for a new or higher qualification, they can start that in trimester 3 if they're completing the lower one at the end of trimester 2. That is correct. So this current March grant round is for people that are starting studying from semester 2 and or 3 in 2022. So if they're completing and that they will be starting a new qualification in semester 3, then we encourage you to put your application into this grant round. I'm hoping that's clarified that question there. And of course, that will depend on what's being offered by different organisations in semester 3. So again, I encourage people to go back and have a look at the educational institution that you're considering studying with, looking at what all of their options are to help you start to plan out where your studies might lie. Awesome. Thank you for just letting me to pause and take a little breath and just make sure that there weren't any other questions that have come through. Again, I just want to say a really generous thank you to everyone that's been able to join us today. Your questions have been really insightful and helped us, in terms of what are the things that people really want to know and, how we can support and answer those as well. Again, have a really strong think about it. We're really looking forward to some amazing applications. Big thumbs up to everybody that's already registered on the Perpetual Guardian website. And that's kind of the first step of the process, is to kind of undergo that as well. I just want to give Julia and Anna an opportunity if there's anything extra, and the team from Perpetual Guardian, before I potentially close today, and I will close with a karakia. So I'm just going to double check and open the floor for them.
I just want to say thank you everyone for coming along and attending, and please send in your questions, because although we've tried to think about everything from every single possible angle, I'm sure you'll come up with some that we haven't considered, and we would really like to make sure that we include answers to the more gnarly questions so that other people get the correct information. But yes, as Megan said, we're really looking forward to seeing all the applications and seeing the impact of this work, because we've been working on this for a while, and it's very exciting for us to start to see the interest in it. So thank you all so much.
Much appreciated, Anna. So again, I will close with a karakia to kind of bring us back together and then give you an opportunity to head off into your afternoon. Yeah. So unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia māma te nākau, te tinana te wairua I te ara takatu. Koia rā I rongo whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, huie, tae kie. Kia ora everyone, I wish you well and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Kia ora, Megan, thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks, guys. Nice to see you, Megan.
Kia ora, Laura.
See you later. Bye.
Kia ora, team. We'll just wait for the last few people to exit out. Yep. Three, two, one. We're all back in the room. I'm not sure if we can stop the recording now. Yeah.